Welcome and thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode. Today's webinar is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. Now I'd like to turn the call over to Ms. Amanda Klemick. Amanda, you may begin.
Thank you, Lisa, and good afternoon to everyone joining us this afternoon for our webinar on creating custom tables using the American Community Survey's Public Use Microdata Sample, or PUMS files. My name is Amanda Klemick, and I work with the American Community Survey Office's Outreach and Education Branch. I'd like to remind you that today's webinar is being recorded. If you'd like to follow along with our webinar today, we have posted the slides online on the link at the bottom of the screen. I believe I saw it in the chat earlier as well. We'll also have a recording and a transcript available on our website within the next few weeks. If you have any questions during the webinar, please post them in the Q&A box, and one of our team members will try their best to respond to you as quickly as possible. Instructions for using the Q&A feature during the presentation can be found posted in the chat. Census Bureau staff will be on standby to answer your questions. Based on previous feedback about our webinars we have had in the past, we have heard that users consistently want new and different ways to access our data. With that in mind, we want to take this opportunity to show you exciting new updates that we have to the tools we use to access PUMS data. We hope this webinar will be useful for those who are new to PUMS data as well as experienced users. We're going to start by going over some of the basics to get you familiar with ACS data and the PUMS. We'll then go over PUMS geography, specifically focusing on public use microdata areas, or PUMAs, and how to find them. Then we'll do a couple of demos on both accessing the data through our FTP site and creating custom tables on data.census.gov. Finally, I want to take some time to briefly go over the new Microdata API and point you toward where you can go to access the data and learn about this new tool. We'll then look at some resources for finding out more and leave you with some ways you can reach out for help with the survey, as well as how to get involved in the ACS community. The American Community Survey, or ACS, is the nation's most current, reliable, and accessible data source for local statistics on critical planning topics such as age, children, veterans, commuting, education, income, and employment. The survey samples approximately 3.5 million addresses. These data are collected continuously throughout the year to produce annual social, economic, housing, and demographic estimates. The ACS is also used to distribute more than $675 billion of federal government spending each year. These estimates cover more than 40 topics and support more than 300 known federal uses and countless non-federal uses. Businesses and communities use these estimates to make vital decisions, including where to locate hospitals and schools, what transportation needs exist, and what goods and services businesses should provide to customers. We typically release 3 different data sets of pre-tabulated estimates each year in the form of 1-year and 5-year period data sets, as well as 1-year supplemental estimates. Although this looked a little different for the 2020 ACS data release. The content collected by the American Community Survey can be grouped into 4 types of characteristics: social, economic, housing, and demographic. You can see some of the social characteristics listed on the left, including popular topics such as disability and educational attainment. The American Community Survey also collects basic demographic characteristics such as age, Hispanic origin, race, relationship, and sex. This is the same information collected on the decennial census. Economic characteristics below include topics such as income, employment status, and the others you see here. Housing characteristics listed on the right include both the physical and financial characteristics of housing, such as year built and home value. Each question on the ACS is required for federal and state government programs. We provide a resource on the ACS website called the Why We Ask page, which gives the public information on the required use cases for these questions, as well as how they appear on the questionnaire. Now it's time to get into the basics of the Public Use Microdata Sample, or PUMS. ACS data products are released about 1 year after the data are collected. The PUMS is a publicly available subsample of ACS records. The planned release date for the 2016 to 2020 ACS 5-year PUMS is March 31st, 2022. 1-year PUMS estimates are a subsample of data collected over a calendar year and constitute approximately 1% of all U.S. households in total, whereas the 5-year PUMS combines data collected over 60 months and constitute approximately 5% of all U.S. households. Additional restrictions are added together to protect the data, such as including broader categories of data or grouping together extreme values in the form of top and bottom coding. PUMS files allow data users to calculate their own estimates and MOEs that may not be available on data.census.gov, the Census Bureau's primary dissemination platform. Statistical software is generally recommended when working with PUMS files unless you are working with our microdata access tool on data.census.gov, which we will be going over in a demonstration later in this webinar. So why do we use the PUMS? If you're already familiar with the ACS program and its data, you know that we already meet some of the needs of data users, but not all of them. For example, consider this table, which is titled Detailed Occupation for the Full-Time, Year-Round, Civilian, Employed, Female Population 16 years and over. That's quite a mouthful. That's a lot of topics combined into one table. To create every estimate in this table, we use responses from a combination of 6 different questions on the ACS that ask about occupation, employment status, weeks worked, hours worked, sex, and age. However, you may be interested in data for a different population or at a different level of detail than what is available here. The Census Bureau produces these PUMS files precisely so that data users with varying needs have the ability to conduct their own analyses. Specifically, the PUMS allows you to create custom tables to get a greater level of detail than what these standard tables offer, create new variables using unique combinations of person and/or household variables, and they allow you to conduct statistical analyses that allow you to analyze the relationship between variables. So let's recap with an example of this microdata and what makes it different from the summary data that you might be used to seeing in data.census.gov or other sources. In these summary tables, such as the one showed on top, individual records are categorized and weighted in order to create an estimate for the larger populations. For example, statisticians at the Census Bureau have taken the records of all respondents living in Louisiana who indicated that a male in their household works in a computer and mathematical occupation, grouped them together, and weighted them to create an estimate of all males in Louisiana working in this occupation category. These statisticians have also calculated and provided the margin of error for this estimate, which you see on the right. By contrast, the microdata below in the table on the bottom right provides a sample of those records that the statisticians used. Here, you can see that one person responded to the ACS in Louisiana is a male web developer. To create this estimate, the data user must take this raw data and follow the same steps that the statisticians did in the example above. So, as I mentioned in the previous slide, PUMS data provide individual records that data users must aggregate to form estimates. Unlike in data.census.gov, there are no pre-tabulated data in the PUMS. Weights are included on PUMS files so that data users may create weighted population estimates. If you're working with housing records, you'll use the housing weights, and if you're working with person records, you will use, you guessed it, person weights. When working with a merged file that includes both housing and person records, person weights should be used to produce estimates for person characteristics. Housing characteristics cannot be tallied from this merged file without taking extra steps to ensure that each housing weight is counted only once per household. Replicate weights, those numbered 1 through 80, are used for calculating replicate estimates needed to calculate standard errors. Standard errors using replicate weights are necessary in order to calculate associated margins of error, or MOEs. On that note, we love when you use margins of error, or MOEs. MOEs allow data users to be certain that at a given level of confidence, the estimate and the actual population values differ by no more than the value of the MOE. Put simply, the MOE is a measure of the possible variation of an estimate around the population value. The Census Bureau uses a 90% confidence interval as the standard in all published tables. In February 2020, we had an informative webinar on how to calculate MOEs using PUMS data. You can find the recorded webinar and associated transcript on Census Academy's recorded webinar page, which is linked on this slide. So I mentioned before that the 2016 to 2020 5-year PUMS will be released next month. The 5-year PUMS is the equivalent of 5 one-year files, so it includes about 5% of all U.S. households. So people often ask, well, what's the benefit of the 5-year PUMS as opposed to the 1-year PUMS? But there are some nice standardizations for the 5-year PUMS that you can't necessarily get by just merging 5 one-year files. So for example, new ways to produce for these records so that the weighted population matches the latest population estimate. Dollar amounts have an adjustment factor to standardize them to the latest year so that no one is comparing varying levels of inflation, and other coding schemes such as ancestry and occupation are updated so that you don't have to recode those yourself. And if you're interested in an example of how PUMS can be used in action, you can visit an interactive data visualization that we released a couple years ago on young adults in higher education. And we used PUMS rather than our internal microdata to showcase the sophistication of what can be done using the PUMS. So a lot of our data visualizations that we put out use our internal data, but this visualization was created by our statisticians using publicly available data. So you could do everything that is in this data visualization on your own. We went through the same steps that any data user would to aggregate the data and calculate associated MOUs using replicate weights. The result was an interesting story on what degrees young adults are getting and what those degrees are doing for them in terms of occupation and earnings. So you can see there's a great graphic in the middle that shows you exactly what fields of degree lead to which occupation. So that's a product that we don't generally offer in the standard ACS tables. This is not an analysis that could have been done conducted using only our existing tables. So now that we've covered some basics, we can delve into PUMS geography, which might be a little different than the type of geography that you're used to. To ensure the confidentiality of ACS respondents, the Census Bureau has to balance geographic detail in the data with the detail in the data. There are more than 250 variables on a single PUMS person record. This means that we can't identify as many small geographies in the PUMS as users might hope, but we can go over our options in a moment. We can put the region, division, and state on the file, but the only other geography that is something called a public use microdata sample, or public use microdata area, or PUMA. PUMS is not designed for statistical analyses of small geographic areas, but PUMAs can still be used for focused analyses in counties and cities of 100,000 people, as well as many metro areas. So I'm going to show an example of this shortly so you can kind of get an idea of what PUMAs entail and what you can use them for. So first, we're going to discuss the basics of PUMAs. PUMAs are areas with a population of at least 100,000, which is large enough to meet our disclosure avoidance requirements. PUMAs are identified by a 5-digit code that is unique within each state. These geographies are redefined after each decennial census and are defined by either the state data center or, in some cases, the Census Bureau's regional geography staff. For example, PUMAs redefined after the 2010 census were first used in the 2012 PUMS files. 2020 PUMA definitions will be introduced with the 2022 PUMS files. As with many geographic concepts, seeing PUMAs on a map might help you understand them better. The two maps you can see on the right are shown at the same scale. You can see that most of the PUMAs in Wyoming on the top map are larger than the PUMAs in New Jersey on the bottom. This emphasizes that PUMAs are truly built based on population and not on geographic size. So I want to highlight two tools here that will help you determine what PUMAs you need. The first is from the Missouri Census Data Center, which has a fantastic, it's called a geographic correspondence engine. And that can be used to match PUMAs to other geographies of interest, which is one way to figure out what PUMAs you have. It'll spit out a spreadsheet which will give you how much of each PUMA is within each county or vice versa. And Census Academy, which is a great website that we have that has a lot of great recorded webinars. That's where this webinar will be posted, and other instructional courses and brief videos. They have a brief 7-minute tutorial to walk you through using GeoCore, and it comes complete with a demonstration on converting PUMAs to counties and vice versa. The link can be found at the bottom of the slide. You can also access the tutorial by visiting census.gov/academy and visiting the Data Gems section of the top navigation bar. The video is titled, "What Tracks for My Neighborhood? How to Use the GeoCore to Identify Geographies that Make Up Your Area." So this is one tool that you can use to decide what pumas you need. Another way is to use the Census Bureau application, TigerWeb. This is a web-based application which helps you drill down physically and see which pumas correspond to which areas of geography. And as you can see, this is going to be a slightly more visual medium than looking at a spreadsheet, but also effective. The screenshot shows part of the greater DC metro area, and we can see the District of Columbia has a large population and consists of several pumas. You would aggregate those pumas to get the data for the District of Columbia. So combining several pumas to get one, larger, more well-known geography. Most of the surrounding counties are also large enough to consist of several pumas, which can be combined to approximate the county. So we see an example, Alexandria, beneath the DC has approximately enough people to be its own puma and its own county. And then, you can see Fairfax County also has several pumas within the county, and that's to the left of Alexandria. So the primary difficulties occur when we get further away from urban centers to counties with smaller populations. And in that case, you start having to combine several counties to make one puma. In these cases, it becomes less feasible to be able to infer data about the individual county. So furthermore, while I'm showing examples of pumas adhering to county boundaries, it's not a requirement that pumas be designed that way, although it is generally recommended because those are geographies that people are familiar with. Now, once you know about PUMS data, you need to know how to access it. So we're going to start looking at ways to access it. The most common way to access PUMS data is to use the statistical software through our file transfer protocol, or FTP site. And we'll go over how to get the raw PUMS files in a second, but we're also going to show you, if you're not familiar with statistical software, a more user-friendly, interactive way to get the data. So in the fall of 2020, we redesigned a section of our website to be a one-stop shop for all things PUMS related. Here you can access PUMS data, documentation, and other resources. You can navigate here by going to census.gov/ACS and clicking on the Microdata tab in the left navigation bar. The Microdata section is where we're going to start our search for PUMS data. And to begin, we'll go to the Accessing PUMS Data tab, highlighted in red on the left-hand navigation bar. The slide highlights the steps that you're going to need to take to download the PUMS files from the FTP site from the Accessing PUMS Data page. Once you navigate to this page, select the year you're interested in from the Year tabs on the page. Then, under the heading Access on FTP site, you'll decide whether you want the 1-year or 5-year. From then, you'll see a list of files with a naming convention that identifies whether the files are in a CSV or Unix format, and whether it is a housing or population file, then whether it is a file for the US or an individual state. So you can kind of see there's a CSV that tells you it's to be CSV file, and then there's an underscore, there will be an H or there will be a P. And the H tells you it's housing, and then you have the 2 last letters that state. So the very first file you see in the screenshot tells you it's a CSV file. It is a housing file, and it is for the state of Alaska. If you want, for instance, the US file, you will do US, so it'll be CSV_HUS. So as you can see, there is another way to get data besides the FTP site. In the next section, we're going to actually go here to the live site and do a demonstration of creating custom tables using the PUMS Microdata Access tool. So now we're going to switch over and have a quick demo on the brand new way to access PUMS data, which is through the Microdata Access tool in data.census.gov. And this is a method that requires no knowledge of statistical software in order to create your own tables. So I'm going to switch over to this. We are going to go straight to the PUMS website. Okay, so we're going to start here on the PUMS website, and we're going to start. At first, we're just going to start with the 1-year estimates, the ACS standard 1-year estimates public use microdata sample. We're going to select 2019, and then we are going to move on to the next section, and it will lead us through, it leads us through pretty smoothly. So it's kind of like, you know, it's kind of like shopping for variables. It even has a cart, your data cart. So today we're going to do a quick analysis on the construction industry. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick a couple of variables that we think might be useful in an analysis of the construction industry. Maybe we want to know about young adults in construction. So we're going to need our age variable here. This is age P, and the P just means it is a person variable, and we can see the variable name is HP, age. That one's pretty straightforward. As you can see, there's some variable names that are a little less straightforward. So we'll kind of go into how to search for those in a second. If you go over here all the way to the right, you're going to see this details section. And here's where you can click to get a data dictionary. And this is incredibly useful because you can quickly see the values that you're going to need and see, if, you know, sort of see what was included in the variable. And, you know, that will be important later when we're kind of looking at some variables that we, you know, might not necessarily know immediately what's included. So we're going to add this in. It's checkmarked, so that means it's added in. We're going to search, as you can see, you can search on the variable name or the label. And so we're going to search on the variable name. We're going to see if there's a variable for sex, because we could add that into our analysis too. So we're going to search that. Looks like there is. We're going to add that in. And then we're going to need to, you know, analyze the construction industry. But, you know, I want to look at people's occupations. But off the top of my head, I don't remember what the variable name for occupation is. So here I can just go to the label section, and I can go search for occupation here. And I have two possible results for occupation. There's two variables that can give you some occupation data. So I'm just going to go into my detail section here and see, you know, is this the code list I'm used to using? They're pretty similar, but you know, this occ section, this looks like something I've used before. So I'm going to select this variable. I'm going to select the occ variable. And again, you can go into details and see what all is included if you want to, you know, go through and check and, you know, make sure that's the variable you're expecting. So we have these variables added. As you can see, we have 3 variables in our data cart. So that's a quick way to show us, you know, where we are in our analysis. Then we can go to select geographies, and we're just going to pick a state today. We are going to pick on Pennsylvania today. So we have Pennsylvania, and we are going to go into our data cart here. So here's where we kind of start sort of editing our variables and customizing our analysis. So here we have the age variable highlighted. And what I want to do, I'm just going to limit the universe for now. So this is not creating any specific categories. This is just limiting what's included in the scope of the table. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to limit it, the very bottom section. I'm going to limit it 18. Is going to be the minimum, and I'm going to go through 34, and that's what I'm going to define as young adult today for my analysis. I'm going to take it under 1 year, and I think that's good for now. We're going to leave sex as it is, and we're going to go down to occupation. And, you know, like I said earlier, you know, you can search these variables using some keywords in the label. So I'm going to go ahead and just search construction. And this gives me all of the variables that have construction, or all of the responses that have construction in the label. So I'm going to go ahead and select all of these. I'm going to keep all these selected. I'm going to take this out real quick, actually, because right now all of these responses are included in the universe. I'm going to uncheck this, and then I'm going to go back to our construction variables. Construction, and I'm going to make sure all of these are included in the universe. And then I'm going to go back, and we can see that it got rid of everything except for the construction groups. So we are going to, you know, we're going to just go ahead and take a look and see what our table looks like. And actually, real quick, a common question people have when they use this access tool. So if you can actually hit view table straight from the data cart section once you've edited your variables. If you go to table layout, that's going to give you, just kind of a preliminary preview of your table. It's just a preview. So sometimes people get to this section and they say, I'm not getting any data, I'm just getting question marks. So that's because this is just a preview. You still have to hit view tables. So here's what we get immediately, just right off the bat. So we have some options here. Once you put your variables in, you still have the ability to edit the tables. So what we have here is we have sex, we have male, female here, and we have everything is under this row heading of Pennsylvania. All of these construction categories are under the row heading of Pennsylvania. I don't necessarily know. I don't really think we need the Pennsylvania in these rows. We just have one geography today, so we know the entire table is Pennsylvania. So we're just going to go ahead and see if we can add that to not on table. If you see here, it doesn't change our values at all if we take it off the table because the table knows it's Pennsylvania. So we're just going to clean it. We're going to start cleaning the table up a little bit. So it's still Pennsylvania. You can see that here in the universe. Everything in the universe of your table is going to be included in this universe statement. So if you don't see it here, that's when you want to worry. But right now we see it here, so we're fine. We can see that the age category is limited to 18 to 34. And then we have all of these occupation codes in here that show these construction industries. So this is our very basic table that shows us a quick analysis of the construction industry. But what I notice here is we have the average age of all of the people who fit into these categories. But when we're looking at such a tight age group of 18 to 34, I'm not sure if that really tells us what we're going for. We're really more interested in how many people fit into those groups. So we can click on this and we can select count instead, and that will, I think that's a little more useful for our analysis today. You can also see, I talked about weights a little bit earlier. You can see up here in the weighting section, it uses the person weight. So we're working with a person variable, how many people work in these occupations, so we're using the person weight. So yeah, this is our basic analysis. You can also, you can go back in and you can continue editing your variables if you want to do a little more analysis. So we can also do something called a recode. Say we wanted to look at a couple of different age groups. So I'm going to put everything back in the universe here. I'm going to click Create Custom Group. And as you can see, that adds this new code down here that is this age recode. So what we're going to do is we're going to create the same category we did before. We're just going to call it, young adults. Okay, and we are going to do the same thing we did before, 18 to 34. And yeah, that looks good. I think we're going to add that to the group. We're going to make sure that this little notch here says show on table, and kind of self-explanatory. That will make sure that it's showing on the table when we click view table. We're going to save that group. And, actually before I go back to the table, I think I want to add another group. So we have a couple of options here. This is the remainder. So this is the ages that are left over after we took out this young adult category. So I'm also interested in, those 65 plus. I'm going to look at 65 plus. And to do that, I'm just going to go in here. I'm going to select this one. I'm going to put in the minimum of 65. So we have 65 and the maximum is 99. And we are going to save that group. Then we have this not elsewhere classified, which is, again, the remainder. We're not really interested in that. We're really interested in just the categories we've created. So we're going to click show on table. We don't want that to show on the table. So we're going to make sure it's not showing on the table. And then we are going to hit view table. Oh, always save your changes. Okay, and here we are. And as you can see, we have to add it in. So when you get results that you don't necessarily expect when you go into your table, your first thought is going to be you can play around with the variables and move them around and order them. So we want this to be showing. We're going to put this on the columns. oh, this is our age recode actually, so we want this to be shown. So this is our age recode we created. And so you can see here, now we have male, female, and we have it broken down by these young adult 65 plus categories here. If you want, you can actually reverse these. So if you would rather it be broken down by the age categories and then broken down by male, female, you can just drag these and switch them. So it really depends on, you know, what you want to use in your analysis and, you know, what you want to present. So, you know, I think this table is pretty good for my analysis. I think I'm ready to save it and use it in my work. So you can go to this download share section here, and you can go ahead and download this data as a, you can download the table view. You can download it as an Excel file. That's pretty self-explanatory. You can hit download table view, or you can extract the raw data. So, essentially the data that you'd be using to create this table yourself. But I recommend download table view if you want to keep the table as is. And it, as I said earlier, it automatically puts the person weight in for you. So download table view download is going to give you a CSV file, which allows you to work with the data. And that's, that's really the quick intro to this great microdata access tool. And there's also some great resources on our website that I will point out later that shows you, gives you step-by-step guides on how to use it. If you want to share this with somebody, if you want to send this to a colleague or, save it for yourself for later, you can click copy bookmark, and then it will, paste for you later just as you left it. But now I want to take a moment to show you. We're going to go over quickly the microdata API. So this is kind of a cool thing that is fairly new to our ACS group of tools. It is the microdata API. If you are not familiar, if you're not yet familiar with the API, it's just a really great way to be able to quickly access data basically straight from our servers. So it's a great way to be able to consistently access our data based on, the years, data sets, variables you need. So we're going to quickly take a look at that. If you are not familiar with the API yet, there are some great resources on Census Academy, which I mentioned Census Academy earlier, but I just want to show it to you real quick. So, if you go to census.gov/academy, quick preview, there's a lot of great POMs and API resources on here. Up in this data gem section, there are the 7-minute brief tutorials, not necessarily all 7 minutes, but just short, brief tutorials, webinars. We have upcoming and recorded webinars. That's where this will be posted. And we have some courses and tutorials as well. So that's going to be a really great resource for you for if you want to get familiarized with the API. And there's also some POMs resources in there as well. But this is not really an intro webinar to the API, but I will show you some, I'll show you some intro to the microdata API just to kind of give you an idea of what it does. So I am going to copy these two. So you can, just like I did earlier with the copy bookmark, I'm going to copy these API queries. And this is you can see it's an API GET query. And what that does is that just gives you, that's going to give you the raw data that went into that table we made. So you saw earlier where I showed you the table that had all of the records that went into that male web developer in Louisiana. So that's the same idea here. These are all individual records that went into that table that we just created. So if you're interested in working with that data, you can quickly get it here. But if you just want to go into the table you made and get that through the API, you can do what's called the tabulate query. So we're just going to copy this, and this is the get API tabulate query. And you can see the difference here. This is effectively the table we made. This is exactly the table we made. And here we have, it says, it has tabulate right in the query, whereas this one has the get in the link. So that's, you can quickly be able to tell the difference. If you want to find resources on how to work with this microdata API, you can go into the census.gov/developers. So I got there the same way I did census.gov/academy. Just go to census.gov/developers. If you go to guidance for developers, there is a great Census Microdata API user guide in here. And it just, takes you through the basics. So if you really want to get into it, this is a great resource. There's also, we're going to go to, if you want to really get started with working with the microdata API, .html. So I'm going to go to, this is called the Census Bureau Data API Discovery Tool. So this is a repository of every data set we have available in our API. So I'm going to go ahead and search for ACS. I want 2019. So I'm going to do the ACS 1 year. Let's see. I want microdata. So this is every data set that's within the 2019 ACS. And that includes 1 year, 5 year, and then we have the PUMs down here. So I want the 1 year PUMs. So here we go. Here it is. Okay. So here you can see the 1 year PUMs in the and this is called the discovery tool. And so you can go in here and you can see just a lot of great information about this data set. So if we click on geographies, we can see what geographies are available. This looks very similar to sort of what we went over earlier. We have region, division, state, and PUMA. And then, we can see the variables. So this is a great way to find, if you want a data dictionary, this is a great way to find a data dictionary. We also have data dictionaries in, many formats, PDFs and so forth, available on our website. And I'll go over that later. Those might be, those tend to be a little more user-friendly. We have variables, and something that's going to be really helpful is we have examples. So if you want to, kind of have a sample query or a query to build off of, you can go into this section and you can, let's go ahead and copy this one. We are not going to use our key for today. So we're going to take out the key section, but we're going to, so this is a sample query that they provide. And at the top here, you can see all the variables that go into it. And let's see. So we have sex, we have this TWGTP, or GTP, and what that is the person weight. So you can kind of see it's roughly, it says person weight. And we have MAR, SCHL, and state. So, I'm not sure exactly what all those variables are. So I can do a couple things. I can go back and I can go into the variable section of the discovery tool, and I can, search it by hitting Control F, or I can go into, I'm going to go back and use our more user-friendly tool, and I'm going to search, I want to know what MAR is. So, okay, MAR is marital status. And if I click on details, I can see all of the different, all of the different marital status sections. So here we go. So let's see. So we have marital status, and we have, let's see, SCHL. What's that? That is educational attainment. So this is, what this query is giving us is it is marital status and educational attainment. So that is what the sample query is giving us, and that's how you can kind of quickly see like what variables are included in the API and sort of what your options are. So one other thing I want to show you is that there's been some really great improvements in tools that are available for working with the microdata API. There's a great, actually, we have our sort of regular collaborator. His name is Kyle Walker, and he was the author of Tidy Census. Is anybody familiar with Tidy Census? It is a great R package based on the Tidyverse, and there is a really interesting addition to it recently called the getPums function. So if you want to go to, it actually has 2 chapters on census microdata. So if you go to it, we have Introduction to Census Microdata. It kind of gives you an intro, and then it also gives you some instructions for using this. So if you go down here, you can kind of see this is pretty much what we've been doing the entire time. It's just in our format. So we have this get PUMS function. We put in our variables, we put in our state, we put in our data set, we put in our year, and it spits out. This is similar to what we've been doing. The rest of this afternoon. So. We're very thankful that we have really great data users that work on these tools for us and contribute to these tools because they're really helpful. So, that's just some very quick tools that we can show you that really help us expand on what you can do with PUMS. So finally, we want to share some ways to find out more and to stay in touch. So much of the information that you heard today, minus the information about the new microdata API, can be found in our handbook, Understanding and Using American Community Survey Public Use Microdata Sample Files, What Data Users Need to Know. This is a part of a series on data user handbooks on our website. We have versions of this handbook for general data users, state and local governments, businesses, and more. All of our handbooks can be found at the link listed below. We've gathered several materials that I mentioned earlier to create custom tables in data.census.gov and using the new microdata API. So some of these include step-by-step guides created by our developers and subject matter experts. And you can get here by going to census.gov/ACS, going to the microdata section, and click on how to use PUMS on data.census.gov. So if you'd like to reference these materials in order to find out more tips and tricks, you can go here. You can also navigate to the link on the bottom of the slide. If you navigate to the PUMS documentation tab, which you can see is right below the how to use PUMS on data.census.gov tab, you can see supporting documentation that is released with each new data set. On the PUMS documentation page, the URL at the bottom of the slide, you'll find resources listed on the slide for each data year, including data dictionaries and code lists. So I mentioned earlier, this is a great way to get, if you want a data dictionary that is kind of in more static format or, just a more user-friendly format, you can get, you can get an Excel file, you can get a PDF, and those are just, we try to provide many ways to get the data dictionary, to get the variables you need. So if you end up using ACS data to create real outcomes in your community or business, we want to hear about it. So we have a Share Your Story feature. And if you submit your story, that allows us to share it with others to show how important the data is and everything you can do with it. Also, I want to inform you that there is a group specifically for users of ACS data, and this is a free online forum. The purpose of the ACS data users group is to improve understanding of the value and utility of ACS data, as well as promote information sharing among data users about key ACS data uses and applications. So this includes a website, an online community. We have over 3,000 members, and it contains information such as previous conference presentations and archived webinars. The online community is a site where members can share messages, materials, and announcements related to ACS. Census Bureau staff are also members, and we share program updates here. We also host ACS data user conferences typically every 2 years. And we provide an opportunity for ACS data users and Census Bureau staff to showcase their work and exchange information about their experiences using ACS data. So the most recent conference was held in May of this year. The conferences are open to the public, and information is posted in advance on the data users website. So you'll want to go here for more information. Membership is free and open to all ACS data users. To learn more, go to acsdatacommunity.prb.org. And that's listed at the bottom of the screen. And, if you take what you saw here today and you end up doing something cool with it, we hope to see you at our conference. So sign up for and manage alerts on ACS news and events such as conferences and webinars like the one you saw today by GovDelivery, visit our website, or connect on social media using the hashtag ACSData. For support, you can reach out to acso.users.support@census.gov. And if you end up using ACS data for any cool PUMS uses or otherwise, make sure to source us. It helps people figure out where they can get the detailed information that we are giving you today. So thank you for attending this presentation today on creating custom tables with the ACS Hub.
This concludes today's webinar. You may disconnect at this time.